The true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost. The true heart can tough the poison of hatred without being harmed. Since beginningless time, darkness has thrived in the void, but always yields to purifying light. Let's hold space for that, shall we? Okay, that's enough holding space. Where are my manners? Let me introduce myself. Hello. Welcome to the Realiteapodcast, where you're listening. I'm your host, Layla. And yeah, welcome. We're going to skip all introductory stuff because you'd have to take me out to dinner for that. But we can just get right in. So, I actually was going to do like a little introductory episode to, rev up the engine of the podcast vibes. But I was like, I'm just too excited to talk about this. Especially since I did a little bit of extra research, aka some more evidence has dropped to help with this topic, which it's a little bit all over the place, so bear with me. Just trying. It's gonna be a ride. Just buckle in, strap in. You're here already. Let's just join. Come on. So, I hope y'all are still talking about Wicked because I am. And this whole episode is going to be about Wicked. Specifically, it's symbolism. Really, it's just about symbolism in fiction. I'm going to be comparing two pieces of fiction, two of my favorite pieces of fiction, which is Wicked and Avatar: The Last Airbender. And hear me out. Okay, hear me out. I know that may to some sound like a bit of a stretch, but hopefully by the end of this segment, you'll understand why I did that. So, first and foremost, I just want to preface this by saying I've only seen Wicked Part 1. I have not read the books. I have not seen the play. I don't really know that much about it. Only what I know from Wicked Part 1, The Wizard of Oz, and some spoilers on TikTok. And 2, I have, however, watched Avatar: The Last Airbender more times than I can count. I've read the comics, so I know what I'm talking about there, okay? Although, again, this is just my opinion. So let's just start out with a little storyline. Basically, if you don't know, Wicked came out in 2024 in November, starring Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Ariana Grande plays Glinda/Golinda, and Cynthia plays Elphaba. There's also her co-star Michelle Yeoh and some other people in there. Michelle Yeoh plays Madame Morrible, which is, she just ate that role up. I don't know if it's fitting because, again, I don't really know anything about these series for real, but it touched me, so I felt the need to talk about it. And so here we are. Avatar: The Last Airbender came out in about 2005, which was news to me. They must have been having that show on rerun because I watched it when I was a kid, and I was probably like 4, so I think like 2008. However, I did obviously rewatch it as an adult because boy was I missing stuff. So much went over my head, and the stuff that they sneak in fiction, specifically children's fiction, they're not slick. The message is really there. It's just meant to go over our heads, which is why they put it in kids fiction like Wicked, but Wicked's actually not for kids, but more on that later. So if you haven't seen either, Wicked is simply about, it's a dark fantasy. It takes place in Oz, and it stars Cynthia Elphaba, Ariana Glinda, and they're like in this college setting, and they're trying to, I guess, learn who they're going to be in Oz. It's a mystical place filled with a bunch of different types of people and animals who live amongst people as people. They have jobs, they are recognized as historical figures, but all that's about to change because animals are starting to revert back to their primal nature, and they're being like caged and fired from their jobs, they're not taken seriously, and there's already a lot of symbolism there that we could touch on, but just for reference. And so Elphaba, who I would assume is the main character, she was outcasted and made to be an outcast her entire life by even her own family because of the color of her skin. And she's in college now. She has a sister who is far more accepted, despite her having her own disability. She's far more accepted, and her family actually blames her for her disability. And so there's also underlying tension because of that as well. And she's just so different in contrast to the other main character, Galinda, who is just this packaged white femininity wrapped up in a bow. But more on that later. Okay, not too soon. That's just the base plot for now. And after The Last Airbender basically follows this 12-year-old boy who is the Avatar, which is a spiritual cycle that enhances people with immense power and the ability to restore balance to the world. So essentially, Aang was frozen in an iceberg for 100 years, sleeping through a 100-year war, not only in search for him, but also to establish like world dominance over the world by the Fire Nation, specifically the Fire Lord, because it's broken up into 4 categories: the 4 elements: earth, air, water, fire. And they split up into different nations, living divided in fear of one another, not really trusting one another. What can we say about that? Seen that before? Anyways, so let's just get right in. It's basically just about his journey becoming the Avatar and having to beat this grown-ass man who's petty, don't care. And also, of course, reality. We have some actual tea. It's jasmine, inspired by Uncle Iroh, and it's hot, so I won't be drinking it for a while. Look at it, it's a little man, a little gnome man. It kind of looks like Iroh. Love Iroh. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about a few different topics. Obviously, symbolism. We also wanted to do a comparison in character developments with our main characters, Elphaba, Glinda, and Aang and Zuko. Also talking about the journey of self-actualization, friendship, society, and just a little bit of the kind of watered down tone of racism in the Wicked film. So let's just jump right in. I'm excited. So we can start with the character development. So basically, I wanted to compare Elphaba and Aang and Zuko and Galinda. Now it may seem like a bit of a stretch, but just hear me out. We'll get to it. So Aang is our main character in Avatar: The Last Airbender. He is raised by the Air Nation, which are supposed to be kind of like a, what's the word? Damn. They're supposed to like symbolize like the Tibetan monks, if I'm not mistaken. So he's always lived a life of peace and just kind of carefreeness, completely devoid of attachment, of worldly attachment. And his whole world just comes to a stop when he's told that he's the Avatar, which they told him much younger than they were supposed to because of the rumors of war. Now just a little bit on him. Throughout the story you can see he's just this kid. He just wants to be a normal kid, but he's burdened by his Avatar identity and he has to come to accept that. Now Elphaba, she's been an outcast her whole life, and she's already used to the stigma that comes with the color of her skin and that comes with her power, which is repressed, but it can't help but slip through the cracks when her emotions are heightened, and she has no control over this power, and she probably felt it to be a burden as well because she just wanted to be normal. Like, even though she wasn't the most confident in herself, and although she did slightly accept herself, she also did obviously struggle with the idea of her identity and what it was like to be normal. It goes through anybody's minds. And when I was watching a YouTube video on the Wicked topic in general, it was as a YouTuber, Signified B. He really made some really good points on why this would be so fitting for a black woman to play this role because of the issues of identity crisis and comparison to just regular society. Like, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like in this movie, Loki, like we literally live in a place with munchkins, but we're judging people for being green, I guess. But yeah, so you can see it how just as regular, unfortunately, black people, black women today, we do carry some internalized self-hatred just due to how we were raised. It's so beautiful to see this being undone with our current generation, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to continue to be done with the generations following. But we can admit it, it's there. There's all types of tension in every community revolving black people, whether it's our hair, our skin, the type of skin we have, the type of hair we have, our body type, the way we act, the way we present ourselves. There's stigma everywhere. So you could see this in Elphaba when she was already equipped with responses about her skin color, and she had already prepared a whole speech to anybody who had met her and never seen her before, because she knew that she was a spectacle and something to be looked at. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was a really good detail in the show with making her black, because honestly it makes the most sense. But anyways, back to her and Aang and how they relate as characters, simply just by coming to terms with who you are and integrating your identity instead of running from it, and how other people will notice the power within you first before you've ever even realized sometimes. And while sometimes you can rely on support, it's just important to use discernment, because people will try to take advantage of that. We didn't really see that too much with Aang. He had support wherever he was because people saw him as a savior, kind of like they were in the middle of war and they were looking for somebody. They'd been waiting for him to return. The most we saw with confliction, is that a word? Conflicting, I don't know, conflicting thoughts about his character was probably when the fact that he left because he abandoned his destiny, and probably when he died, or when it was rumored that he was dead. And you could see him struggle with that tremendously because he was so afraid of disappointing people, and he was afraid to, and he was just afraid of what would come with that for his image and his ideals, because he's been working so hard to be this person that everybody wants him to be, that the expectation and the thought of him failing was overwhelming. Whereas with Elphaba, she had always struggled with living up to people's expectations, and I think she just kind of accepted that she was probably never going to. So when the opportunity did arise for her to meet someone's expectation and impress people with her natural ability, she was like thrilled at the opportunity, and she was really excited. She wanted to master her craft after repressing it all this time. And unfortunately, it did fall into the wrong hands, but inevitably it radicalized her, because she had her ideals and her own strong self-concept to the point where she couldn't be used. Unlike Miss Galinda, or Galinda, whatever she calls herself these days, who was so desperate for people's approval and so desperate for people's validation, and she built her entire self-esteem off of what other people thought of her. We see this a lot in just her character in general, and her obsession with popularity and self-concept of just who this image that she's trying to orchestrate for herself all of the time. It never stops. It's exhausting. And you can see that the minute a glimpse of her real personality, if you want to call it that, or her conscience, I don't know when it slipped through, when she was finally being nice to Elphaba, you could see how she was being rejected immediately, and maybe she realized, like, oh, these people, like, don't care about me. Or even with Fiyero and her constant need for his attention, it's fake, because it's built off of this fake persona that she baits to specifically be desired, because she's constantly putting herself into this position of desire. And I also read an article on Substack specifically talking about female desire and sexuality with, the movies Baby Girl and that other movie that Lily Rose Depp is in. I don't know what it's called. I haven't seen it. And it talks about, you can see it in this as well, the contrast of desire. But there's two different things. There's desire and there's wanting to be desired. And you can see Elphaba has a real desire to help people and to support people and to master her craft. She wants to be a good person. She's not even really focused on being a good person, but she's just worrying about being a complete person and understanding herself and who she is. And she's willing to do whatever to do so that way she doesn't hurt people with her abilities. Whereas Glinda is wanting to be desired. She wants to be this pretty princess and this sorcerer who has all this power, and she wants to influence people, and she puts up this facade of activism even when she changed her name because of how the goat professor was pronouncing her name, because I guess that's how he was pronouncing it. He's a goat. I don't know. He pronounced it Glinda, and it was Galinda, and she had like the biggest problem with that. But when he was removed, she did this fake outburst of activism and decided to change her name, and it was this huge uproar. People loved her for it. But do you see the lengths? If you saw the movie, you saw the lengths she went to get everyone's attention just to say that, like, just to regret it the minute she said it. Like, girl, why did you do that? But anyways, it's just this performative activism which we see in, the white folk very often. It's very prevalent to this day, of this pretend allyship and this performative activism. It was really prevalent, especially during like 2020 and the BLM movement. Everybody had those damn everybody had those goddamn black wallpapers and profile pictures for the longest. Charlie D'Amelio did not take that down for the longest. But it's like, what do you actually do for black people? Nothing. Let's skip the facade. And so yeah, to compare her to now Zuko. Sorry, I said this is gonna be all over the place. It is. Bear with me. Zuko, it's a little different. Well, not really. They were both raised in an immense amount of privilege and taught that they were better than everybody else because they were just born into it. And Zuko, he is the crown prince of the Fire Nation, the Fire Lord. His father is running the ship on this entire war. It was started 2 generations before him. His great-grandfather, and obviously, naturally, he's going to carry the torch. It's crazy how he was the one to fuck it up, but, had to be done. So, his whole life, Zuko had struggled to gain his father's acceptance, love, and approval, and he'd just been doing whatever he could to get it, and eventually he was banished from the Fire Nation, the palace, because of I stutter, I'm sorry, because he was speaking out of turn during some war meeting, and his father burnt him up and sent him on his merry way. That's the summary, go watch the show. But throughout his journey being banished for 3 years, he was doomed to chase the Avatar. That was like the only way he could get back into his throne. That was the only way he could get back his throne, was by finding the Avatar and killing him. This whole time he was on this wild goose chase to find the Avatar. He was seeing all different parts of the world and all of the different effects of this war, and realized how wrong he was and how wrong his father was. He was very stubborn, though. I mean, it was years of indoctrination, so naturally it was coming as a shock to him, and it was really hard for him to believe at first that his father didn't care about him and that people were people. He viewed other people from other nations as peasants and beneath him, because that's just how he was wired to think. And even after they did capture the Avatar and quote-unquote kill him, when he did gain his throne back and his father's acceptance, he realized how conditional it was and saw that it wasn't worth it. However, that is the difference between him and Glinda. When it was revealed that Oz was the mastermind behind this whole orchestration of the animals disappearing, and whatever other injustices were happening in Oz, Glinda was complacent she didn't actually make any change. She folded under the pressure of the idea of her perfect image being crumbled, and she decided to be an ally for where she actually had loyalty to, which was to herself. She did not help Elphaba when she was made to be a not just an outcast, but now it's like times 10. Like, she was on the run. She decided to stay behind and be a figurehead and have this fake power, all in the name of how she's being perceived. And there was also something I noticed in regarding this, because throughout the whole Wicked movie, it's basically like good v evil, whatever. And when I was rewatching The Wizard of Oz, just to try and see if there was anything to relate to, which there's really not, it's a completely different story, but you do see glimpses of it. In the beginning, the first thing that Glinda says to Dorothy is, "Are you a good witch or are you a bad witch?" And she asks her the question like 3 times before she's like, "Girl, I just told you I'm not a witch, like, stop asking me." And that's when Elphaba comes in, and apparently that scene is where like the whole idea for Wicked even came from. Just the fact that they knew each other, and they had, it just gave like, of course you would do this to me, you know. Anyways, let's just stick to what I'm actually talking about. The question, are you a good witch or are you a bad witch? And that's something that you can see in Wicked when they're in college. Glinda is just working towards, she just wants to be perceived as this good, pure person. Like, when she first meets Elphaba, she's like, "When I master sorcery, the first thing I will do is help everyone. I just want to help everyone, and I would love for you to be the first person that I help." Just this unsolicited act help that nobody asked you for, and you're just assuming that someone needs help is just so weird. But and that's something that Black women obviously like struggle with all the time. Like, especially me personally, like as a dark-skinned Black woman, something that I hear all the time is compliments revolving my skin color and my confidence thereof, which is just so backhanded and condescending, because I don't know why people feel the need to assure me that I'm pretty because I'm dark skinned. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But this isn't about me, but I thought that was a fun little correlation. So yeah, are you a good witch or are you a bad witch? The whole time Glinda is struggling to, I'm spacing. Let me slow down. You can really see how insecure she is, and you can just see how she has this need, and this incessant need to be liked and to be perceived in one type of light, and specifically in this good light, good, bad, whatever. And there's this quote by Marcus Aurelius in his book Meditations. It's in book 10, section 16, and it is, oh, hold on, I had it written down. Okay, no, I actually just have the book here. Silly me, I'm slow. Okay, hold on. It reads, "No longer talk at all about the kind of man a good man ought to be, but be such." And that's as simple as that. Because you can talk all this talk about being good and what it means to be a good person, but that means nothing if you're not actually acting in accordance to what is a good person. And to even further that, whether good versus bad, that stuff doesn't even exist. Like, there is no good or evil. There's just varying degrees. And we can see that with Elphaba's character, as she's also on this strive to be a good person, because this whole time, her whole life, she's been told that she's this terrible person based off of things that were completely out of her control. And ultimately, her staying true to herself and realizing that she was never the bad guy and she never needed other people to tell her that is just so inspiring. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. Yeah, so it was a little half-baked, we can all admit that, but I just think that if you just do a little bit more digging in the series, there's actually just so much to talk about, and there's just so much to be there's so much hidden in there. So I just want to make that comparison because there's just so much talk of good versus evil. That's kind of like the whole shtick of Wicked. And it's just so interesting to see how like it mirrors our society of this presumptuous, entitled, so-called, land of the free, with all this bait of the American dream and everything that it will sell you and it has to offer and promises you, and what goes on behind the scenes, the corruptness between our government and just a lot of the people in charge. The satire is satiring. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Moving on. So back to the comparison. That's just where those two characters differ, because ultimately Zuko did step out of that light. It was too late. After realizing, what the world was and who his father was, he decided that that was not the life for him, whereas Glinda decided that she'd rather have the fame and the glory, and that is where the white femininity comes in. But like I said, Signified B did a whole YouTube video on it. It was amazing. Watch it. It was glorious. This brings me to my next topic of self-actualization, which I kind of already talked about a little bit, but just as far as Aang's character, he was just this little kid. He wanted nothing to do with the hands of war. He did not want to get his hands dirty. And when he was faced with the challenge of potentially having to kill the Fire Lord, which goes against his pacifist monk lifestyle, everybody, his ancestors, all of his friends, everyone was telling him, like, bro, you gotta take care of business. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you. You gotta handle this one. He was just not going for it. And just as things were seeming a bit grim, nope, that's the wrong word, bleak. When things were seeming a little bit bleak, there was ultimately another way for him to stay true to his core values and beliefs while ultimately, getting rid of impending doom. So I thought that was really beautiful, and you could see that in Elphaba's character, where she was on the verge of being caught when she was with Glinda, and just as she was like falling down that window, and you can see the glimpse from her and her inner child, and her just realizing the power that she had within, I just thought that was so beautiful, and it is so well done, because you can see her really just stepping into her true nature, and really starting to accept herself and realize how powerful she is, no matter how many people doubt her. Because suddenly, now that she's realized how powerful she is and she's not on your side, y'all don't want her. You could see even Glinda, she was always envious of her abilities, and when she saw the potential and heightened potential at that of what she was capable of, she was trying to dim it down. She wanted to dim her light like the whole time, but when it was starting to look a little revolutionary, she was like, oh nah, let me actually, which is so dumb. Like, you'd think you'd side with someone with that much power, but people only worry about themselves. Hold on, I need to mess up with my tea. That's good, little ASMR for y'all. Anyhow, yeah, so those are just some comparisons with those two characters. I'd also like to compare very briefly Nessa Rose and Azula, just in how they're perceived. Azula is like Zuko's sister, and she's this firebending prodigy. She's never had to really work very hard for her power, apparently, at least in Zuko's eyes. We don't really know that to be true, but that's just what was said. Things just came a little bit naturally for her, where Zuko had to work like much harder to gain his ability and have respect, because he wasn't as naturally gifted as Azula was. So in her father's eyes, he also just saw her as a prodigy, and there was something that Zuko had said. I may be butchering it, but I think he said that his father stated that Azula was born lucky and Zuko was lucky to be born, because Azulon, the Fire Lord, he was never accepting of Zuko. Like, and that's tea. There's more on that in the comics. There's more reason for that. Like, there's a little bit more history about that beyond like his ability as a firebender, but that's unrelated tea. But yeah, so ultimately, with not only her parents' approval, she was just this very entitled, spoiled brat who did not have a care in the world for anybody else. She only cared about herself, and she had one agenda. It was ultimately rooted in her father's love, which we could see in the season's finale when he kind of was like, girl, back up, and she crumbled. And that could be also due to her mommy issues, but again, irrelevant. I just want to make that contrast between her and Nessa Rose, because I'm pretty sure Nessa Rose becomes the Wicked Witch of the West, or East. Yeah, Wicked Witch of the East. But like I said, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know how that came about. But I do know that, in compared to Elphaba, she was seen as like this glory child, and people loved her. And she was able to kind of lead a normal life, outside of, she wasn't green, okay, so she led somewhat of a normal life. There were still people, from what it seemed like, who were kind of like, oh, poor her, because she had a disability, but she was living a far more normal life than Elphaba, and she was far more accepted. And even though Elphaba loved her sister and did anything to protect her, Nessa Rose still had a bit of, what's the word, like, I guess, spite towards her, just out of this need to be independent. But like, and I get it, but girl, please accept the help. Like, she's just trying to be nice. She's just trying to help. But you could see that she didn't believe her. She took Glinda's word over her own, which could also just highlight the influence that these fake passive-aggressive white women have over people sometimes, which I don't get it. Just anyways, but I just thought that was interesting how they were both brought up to be, they were both just coddled and brought up to be these like perfect people in comparison to their imperfect siblings, and how that affected their relationship. Azula had no respect for Zuko. She did not care about that little nigga at all. And Nessa Rose, while I'm sure she does love her sister, there were obviously times where she was just naive and just blinded by people's random outbursts of kindness, and didn't really question things where it came from, even at the expense of her sister. She was just for the birds, low-key. Like, she was for the crowd. She was trying to live her college life, and amen, power to her. So that's really that on that comparison. Yeah, and the quote that I mentioned earlier, that is a quote from Avatar, season 3, episode 15. And I just wanted to bring that quote in because it really resonated with me the first time that I heard it, and I feel like it does have a bit of a role in Wicked as well, because again, the whole point of the theme of Wicked is good versus evil. There are underlying sub-themes, subcategories of themes that are far more important to me than the whole good versus evil trope. But hey, so if I'll read it again, I'll break it down a little bit. The true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost. So we're basically in the scene where this quote is being said. It's by this ancient lion turtle, which are kind of like the birth of land, basically, and life, which I have my own theories on, given a little bit I've learned about Native American history, but another time, another episode. So this is basically being said to Aang when he's having his conflicted feelings about killing the Fire Lord. And so that part, just when it comes to Wicked, we can see how Alphaba is now being painted as the villain, and there's all this propaganda towards her. They are spitting on her name. They are literally, the minute she left, they said, lock down, find this bitch. If you find her, don't hesitate, because she knew the truth. And she could have easily, just as Glinda did, just put it beside her, not think about it, get praise, get worship that she'd always been seeking her entire life. But then instead she stayed true to herself, and she stayed true to what was right, and she left, and it was too late. She had been radicalized. It was too late. So you could see that even though she was in a time of despair, she had nobody. She didn't have her sister, her family. She didn't have her friends. People hated her. People were making out to her to be this wicked person. She remained true to herself. So in that, she is not lost. She is completely secure with who she is now, regardless of what other people may say. So there's nothing you can say. There's no trick. There's no lie. She is who she is, and it's just about accepting that. And because she already has. And I think that's such a. Ooh, I think that's something to highlight for people in general, because when you know who you are, people have no choice but to follow and accept that, because this is who I am. This is what I just said. I just said, no, this is who I am. So it's just something that I think we should all take and store inwardly, because when you know who you are, there's nothing that anybody can tell you about who you are, and that is what makes people insecure. That is the root of all insecurities, is outside voices and opinions that play a role on your subconscious. So when your subconscious mind also knows who you are, and that is brought forth to now be conscious, and you are fully capable of understanding yourself, even in times where things are low, when you don't have anyone to reaffirm what you already know about yourself, you don't need to, because you're there to do it for you. And that your mind is the most powerful thing that you have. Your mind belongs to you and no one else. So when you are truly in control of your mind and not letting your mind control you, you will never be lost. So that's just kind of what that means to me. And the next line reads, the true heart can tough the poison of hatred without being harmed. So part of accepting and putting your foot down on who you are is losing people. It's losing people. It's false perceptions being forced down your throat. It's people giving you side eyes and dirty looks because you're not who they expect you to be or want you to be. You are who you are, and they're not happy about that. So with that can come hatred, and strife. That can come with it too. I need to slow down. But staying true to yourself is the ultimate reward, and you will never be in harm's way. You will never be harmed when you are truly accepting and happy with who you are as an individual and as a being. Because again, people's knives will miss. It'll be like a little jab, and it'll regenerate, because it doesn't matter. It's not real. When you are so happy and loving of who you are to your core as a being, the things that people say they become just nulled out. It doesn't even reach you. It won't harm you. It will not harm you. So yeah, just be real, man. Since beginningless time, darkness has thrived in the void, but always yields to purifying light. So in Wicked, it seems as though, well, we kind of know what happens, like, and it really does mirror our society. People's goodness usually, unfortunately, tends to remain hidden. No one really knows the true story. We only get the narrative that we are pushed from the media and from what people in power tell us, whether that be celebrities, politicians, whatever. And we see that with Wicked as well. We have Oz, who was like the end-all, be-all, powerful master, who was nothing but a figurehead and who was actually so powerless. However, in we have the Wizard of Oz, we had the beginning of Wicked where it showed the witch being dead, Elphaba being dead, and along with that most likely died her revolution. Then again, haven't seen the rest of it, so I don't know, but that's just what I'm gathering. But to me, that part of the quote just always ensures that while darkness will lurk in every little corner that it can, it's a duality. Darkness cannot exist without light. So, that being said, knowing the truth is far more powerful than we've been led to believe, and having that truth within ourselves is a light that will always purify any type of darkness, any type of shadow, because it integrates with it and consumes it. So it doesn't really matter. The message will not die. The revolution doesn't really die just because the missionary does, So that's just something to keep in mind for when times are seeming really tough and really dark. Just remember that we are in control of the narrative. We set the tone. Of our reality. We might set the tone of the narrative because it's a narrative and a persuasive one at that, but we do set the tone for our reality, and we have a lot more power than we think. And as long as we know, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And I remember there's this quote from the movie Lucy, which is such a good movie, also go watch, where basically she's developed her brain and reached like maximum capacity of her brain, and it's just having all this knowledge, she's hyper consuming all this knowledge. It's just pouring out of her. And the professor played by, is that Bill Cosby? That's not Bill Cosby. It's not Samuel Jackson. I'm not gonna get it. But anyways, Truman? I don't know, bro. Anyways, played by that old black man that y'all will know when you see him. He asks her, because she decides to share the knowledge because she's dying. She can't handle it. She's decaying. She's literally ascending, really. She's everywhere. She's ascending this third dimension. She's leaving us. And she wants to leave us with something, so she leaves us with some knowledge. And he asks her, he says, the world's not ready for this. Like, it will bring chaos. And she says, knowledge will not bring chaos. Only ignorance does. And that was a bar she was spitting. Because truthfully, our world is run off of chaos and ignorance. It thrives off of the ignorance of people. The more ignorant people are, the more complacent they are, the more comfortable they are, the more they're convinced that they have no control and that they have no say, and they're comfortable with that because that's what they've been programmed to believe. So knowledge brings a light that they cannot control, because we yearn for knowledge, whether we realize it or not. We are comfortable in lies, but we yearn for the truth. And it's like, once you get a taste of knowledge, you can't help but like be curious. Like, once your curiosity strikes and sparks in you, it's like never ending. It's like feeding a never ending well. So, but that's what people are afraid of. So just remaining curious and remaining true to the knowledge that is programmed within you, not what's been programmed for you to believe, but the things that are programmed in you naturally and inherently, is far more powerful than anything, that any narrative that they can push onto you. So, and I think we'll see that in due time. We already see it now with people starting to portray celebrities, and celebrity culture is a complete different whack. People are revealing the truth behind politicians. We have CEOs getting murked and nobody really gives a damn. So the facade is definitely crumbling. The veil is coming down for sure. But again, more on that another time. But I just definitely feel like that deeply resonates with Wicked and its storyline, and with Avatar: Last Airbender 2. When Aang does go into the Fire Nation, like in disguise in season 3, he enrolls in a Fire Nation school with other children, and you can see how they're actively changing history and the history of the origin of the war and the people of the Air Nation, just completely flipping the narrative to make it seem as though the war was a mutual battle and not a genocide. And we see that in history today. It's repeating itself. If you even believe that. Amen. Time's not even really real for real, but that's another story. Anyways, so yeah, it's just, you can see the satire in both these storylines regarding our society and how they can just relate to us as individuals. And I truly believe that although there are completely different universes and different ends of the spectrum, the themes are the same, and it shows with the duality, with the characters and the society and the setting and the relationships. It all shows. So while this may have been a bit of a stretch, I mean, if you see the comparison, you see the comparison. And it's just something for, I think, all of us to really just think about a little bit more. Like, I think as a society, we're starting to lean towards more philosophy and sociology, and I love to see it because I think that we've really been distracted for so long by the media and just letting people think for us, that it's really empowering to see other people speak their true mind and go out and search and learn things for themselves, because that's the only truth that we're going to have. Because if we continue to allow the truth to be fed to us, we'll only have it wrapped in this pink little bow, served up hot on a pan stove of lies. Okay? Bone apple teeth. Who wants that? Not me. So, yes, inquire, learn, be curious, be confused, go out and figure something out. Crack open that book that's been sitting on your shelf, destined up for 3 years, okay? Open it up. Yeah. So, yeah, that's just pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I did want to talk about a black woman's relationship with witchcraft and spirituality and alternativism for a little bit, but this is already long enough as it is, so I think I'll probably just make a separate video about that, and probably include Wicked in that as well, because you could see a lot of that with Alphabe's character. She literally mainly wore black. She was very alternative in her style and aesthetic, and just her whole personality. Like, even that dance she did, like, it tore. Like, it was beautiful to see. Like, I love to see women be weird. I love to see black women be weird. Like, it's amazing. I love it. So I think I will just make a whole separate episode dedicated towards that. But stay tuned for that. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. The first episode of the Realiteapodcast. Woo! Hey, bow, bow, bow. Okay, so more of my personality will slip through the cracks later on. I'm just have to warm up. I'm a little nervous. Never done anything like this before, so just bear with me. This is a journey that we're all going on together. And now this is just a little segment that I want to add to the end of each episode of Tea Time. Because if you haven't got the name, you saw it. It's Reality, where we talk about the stars, the cosmos, the earth, our little spinning globe that we're on, and all that fun stuff in between, with a load me. So, didn't mean to rhyme, but bars, period. So, at the end, I'd like to just include like a little segment for tea time, which is where I'm going to reveal a little tea quote today. That comes on those little tea bags, you know, those generic ass quotes, but I just think they're so cute and funny. Sometimes they can be really sentimental and sweet. This tea bag that I'm drinking out of right now actually does not have a quote, but I have a picture of one from my phone that I took a couple days ago, so I'm just going to read that one. And it is, "The plants have enough spirit to transform our limited vision." And it was a quote from Rosemary Gladstar. I think that's a beautiful quote. Y'all are actually propped up on my pothos plant right now. So, shout out to Bertha. That's his name, Bertha. So yeah, I'm gonna leave y'all with that. Let y'all think about that for a little bit. And that kind of also ties into the lion turtle things of it all. But hey, like I said, more on that another time. So yeah, that's basically it. That's all I'm gonna say. That's what I'm gonna leave y'all with. Go watch Wicked if you haven't seen Wicked. Go watch Avatar: The Last Airbender if you haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's life-changing. It'll change your life and your perspective and narrative on things. So yeah, love you. Bye.